everyone, and welcome to this HTAi webinar. You're here for the AI and digitalization in HTA, enhancing evidence, equity, and efficiency. As we wait a few minutes for further participants to join, I'll share a few slides with you about HTAi. We were founded more than 20 years ago in 2003, and HTAi is the Global Society for HTA, a neutral, independent collaboration of people and organizations who are dedicated to shaping the future of health systems and improving health outcomes for all people. It offers a trusted forum where knowledge and experience are shared, methods and skills are advanced, and partnerships are forged. To explain clearly, HTA is the practice, and HTAi is the community, the conversation, and the coordination that makes that practice more accessible, efficient, robust, and recognized. HTAi membership holds many benefits, including HTAi's premier events and specialized interest groups, free online access to ISHTAC, our International Journal of Technology Assessment in Healthcare, HTAi resources and news, including e-newsletters, bulletins, and international developments in HTA. Full access to the HTAi educational offers database, an international network of HTA experts, innovators, and influencers, a community that's dreaming, shaping, and championing the future of HTA. And for more information on membership benefits, please visit our membership page on our website, and that QR code on the screen also will take you straight there. We have three main initiatives at HTAi and ways to engage with the membership. One is the annual meeting, another is policy forums, and the third is interest groups. The annual meeting is our largest conference, which gathers our global HTA community annually at different locations around the world. It is an interactive and collaborative environment for HTA stakeholders to convene and contribute to the advancement of HTA. Our policy forums, which are a unique and exclusive platform for HTA experts to exchange ideas, they remove the normal constraints associated with discussions of specific products or policies. And HTA has three policy forums that meet each year: our Global Policy Forum, our Asia Policy Forum, and our Latin America Policy Forum. Our interest groups are member hubs for collaboration throughout the global HTA community. HTAi has 11 interest groups that cover topics such as patient involvement, early career, and real-world evidence, and AI. Over 70% of our HTAi membership is involved in an interest group. We're going to take a closer look at the HTAi annual meeting now. HTAi's first annual meeting took place in 2003 in Canmore, Canada. It is an impartial and inclusive platform for those engaged or involved in HTA or HTA adjacent to meet and collaborate. Each year, the program addresses opportunities and challenges that affect global progress and inspire the advancement of HTA. For 2026, the annual meeting theme is HTA as a system shaper. It will explore how health systems are facing complex global pressures and how health technology assessment can evolve beyond evaluating technologies to help shape more resilient, equitable, and sustainable systems. It highlights HTA's growing role in guiding decisions, connecting evidence to action, and driving meaningful system-wide change. This year, the HTAi annual meeting will take place in Istanbul from June 6th through 10th. The program begins with 2 days of pre-conference workshops, followed by 3 days of scientific sessions. Attendees can expect a dynamic program featuring keynote and plenary presentations, panel discussions, oral presentations, and poster sessions. There will also be dedicated space for sponsored symposia, as well as an exhibition area where organizations can showcase their work and connect with the global HTA community. Alongside the scientific program, there are plenty of opportunities to network, including designated sessions throughout the day and during evening events such as the welcome reception and conference dinner. Thank you for joining us, and I will now hand over to our session chair to formally welcome and introduce today's topic.
Welcome, everyone, to what I believe will be one of the most timely and consequential conversation happening in the health system today. So we are living through a remarkable moment. Artificial intelligence is no longer a distant promise on the horizon of healthcare. It is already reshaping how we generate evidence, how we assess value, and how we make decisions that affect millions of the patients across the globe. Yet with that power comes real responsibility to ensure that the tools we build and adapt are not only technically impressive, but ethically grounded, equitably deployed, and genuinely useful to the health system and to the people they serve. Today, we have brought together 4 exceptional minds from radiology, AI research, health economics, and health clinical implementation, each of them working at the front lines of the transformation, each with a story that is practically as it is visionary. So let me begin to introduce the panelists. Our first panelist brings a truly distinguished perspective from the world of medical imaging and AI. Professor Dr. Şükrü Mehmet Ertürk is a professor of radiology and chair of the radiology department at Istanbul University School of Medicine, one of Turkey's most prestigious academic medical institutions, and as of this year, editor-in-chief of Diagnostic and Interventional Radiology. With a career spanning Istanbul, Munich, and Harvard, where he completed fellowship at Brigham and Women's Hospital, Mehmet has built an exceptional body of work at the intersection of advanced imaging, radiomics, and artificial intelligence. He is one of the leading voices in both Turkish and European radiology societies, and we are truly fortunate to have him with us today. Welcome, Mehmet. Our second panelist is one of Canada's most recognized and celebrated figures in responsible of and applied AI. Dr. Sedef Akinli Kocak is the Director of Applied AI Projects at the Vector Institute, where she leads workforce capacity programs and the Global Alliance for Climate Action Initiative, and she recently joined Ontario Tech University as an adjunct professor within the Trustworthy AI Lab. Named Leader of the Year 2025 by Women in AI North America and listed among the top 25 women in AI in Canada, Sedef brings a rare combination of technical depth, ethical clarity, and genuine passion for making AI work for people and the planet. Welcome, Sedef. Our third panelist is someone who has spent over 2 decades doing what many of us only talk about, actually building the economic models and evidence frameworks that health systems rely on to make consequential decisions. Mark Parker is a director at Zem Solution and a health economist trained at the University of Liverpool and the University of York with deep expertise in agent-based modeling, care pathway analysis, and health technology assessment across international and CEE markets. He has worked with industry, governments, and NGOs alike and brings to this session a grounded, pragmatic understanding of what it really takes to integrate AI into health evaluation frameworks. Great to have you here, Mark. And finally, our fourth panelist represents something we don't always hear enough of in this conversation: the voice of someone actually implementing AI on the ground, inside the hospital, every single day. Flora is the program manager of the SickKids AI service at the Hospital for Sick Children in Toronto, leading an enterprise program that takes AI from concept all the way to clinical and operational impact. With a background spanning the Vector Institute, Human Factor Engineering, Health Informatics, and Computer Science at Dartmouth, Flora brings a uniquely human-centered lens to AI deployment in some of the most sensitive and high-stakes care environments imaginably. Flora, wonderful to have you with us today. So I introduce the panelists, the 4 panelists, and now we have today 3 questions to our panelists. And let me start with the first one. AI and digitalization are often described as transformative for health assessment and evaluation, but transformation looks very different depending on where you sit, whether in policy, academia, or industry. From your own vantage point, this is the single most significant shift that AI or digital health tools have already brought to health assessment and evaluation today. And where do you see the biggest gap between promise and reality? So let me start with Mehmet. So where do you see especially the gap between promise and reality, Mehmet?
Okay, Ufuk. Now, I'm a radiologist, so my viewpoint will be more or less the viewpoint of the radiologist. But, what's true specifically for radiology, in my understanding, is also true generally. If you think about AI, it is, at the bottom level about pattern recognition. And this pattern recognition is, like, for me, for a radiologist, the most important deal. I mean, my routine clinical practice is about pattern recognition. I am checking for patterns, then I'm trying to define these patterns, and then I'm trying to match these patterns with specific medical diagnosis, okay? And this is, a difficult job, a difficult task. AI made this very easy. If you think about pattern recognition, AI is an expert of it. You can think it like this. Think like you are looking for a needle, tiny needle in a haystack. AI is like a magnet. And using this magnet, you can sweep through this haystack. And at the end of the day, you pull all the metallic objects to the magnet. So you can see the pattern. You can match the pattern with the previous data, and you can reach a diagnosis. The gap is about validation. Okay. At the end of the day, AI can recognize patterns, but linking these patterns not to clinical scenarios, but to specific patients is the most difficult part of the game. Because, like in medicine, we have the saying, there is no disease, but there are patients, unique patients. So each patient is different from the other one. So you need to actually run a validation process just to see if what you detected has a clinical significance, a clinical impact. We actually published a very recent paper in a journal of American College of Radiology, and we argued that also using the Gödelian limit as an analogy, we argued that any given model cannot actually bank or run this validation process on its own outputs. So, at the end of the day, you will still need the human factor, the human player, to verify or to run this validation process about the output the AI generated. This gap, the validation gap, will be still there. And it's, in my understanding, it's not so easy solvable thing. It will be, this problem will still be there. So, the shift is the excellence in pattern recognition. The gap is like the assessing or verifying the results and assessing the real clinical impact of AI's output.
Okay, thank you, Mehmet, from the clinical, especially from the radiology point of view, a very valid answer. Can you elaborate your answer, Sedef, for this question?
So I think for my point, the most significant shift AI and digitalization have already brought to health assessment is we are moving us from episodic retrospective evaluation to continuous embedded real-time assessment. So in other words, health system is no longer only something we do after the fact in a report or a scheduled visit. Increasingly, it happens now inside the whole like workflows at the point of care, and sometimes even before a clinician would otherwise see the signals. So I think that is profound shift in evidence generation because evidence is becoming more dynamic, more, let's say, operational, and of course, like more actionable. So if we wanted to put it in like a simple way, moving from retrospective studies and periodic audits toward continuous data-driven assessment, and we wanted to close to true learning health system. So I wanted to give you two examples from Canada, from Vector Institute. So one is the at St. Mike Hospital, which is part of Unity Health Toronto, ChartWatch system. So ChartWatch was developed with support from Vector Institute to identify inpatient at risk of deterioration, so the teams could intervene earlier. So what matters here is not just the model performed well, the matters is that it was integrated into an actual clinical environment, supported by, let's say, silent trials, hourly data pipelines, clinician outputs, and ongoing monitoring for drift. That is what real implementation looks like. So another example is a tool which recently developed by the Vector Institute AI engineering team. I think it's one of the most important contribution because how that the tool evaluates how to evaluate fairness and monitor model drift across time and sites and patient cohorts. So a model can look excellent in one data set and still underperform once the workflow, population, or data distribution changes. So I think that tool reminds us that the evaluation does not end at validation. So going back to what Mehmet was saying, that the validation is really important, and then putting the human factor to the evaluation. So we also have those kind of tools to help those humans for the validation. So I think the gap is mostly on, like, I see the 3 points in the gap. One is the policy and governance gap, which is unclear rules, create hesitation and inconsistent use, right? And then it also brings the trust to the system. And then the second one is skill and capability gap. The workforce often needs more training and support to work confidently with those kind of tools. And then the third one is human resistance and uncertainty. Trust from clinicians, patients, and AI leaders are still uneven. So even when the technology is ready, the organizations often is not. So I think here the AI is not just a technology problem, it is a change management problem for me. So the bottom line for me, the biggest gap between promise and reality is we often talk about AI as if innovation is hard part, but in practice, the hard part is, the validation, governance, and monitoring these tools responsibly in real health system. So I will pause there.
Thank you, Sedef, especially these 3 gaps which you categorize, very valid. So as a person who is building economic models, Mark, so what is your comment on this question?
I really like this question in terms of setting the stage, because it really made me think back over kind of the last decade of where we've been. And I think one of the kind of last challenge where we were, this was sort of 2011, 2012, was this huge big data explosion. The fact that technology and the data collection became something that was much more broadly available and not just the realm of very large institutions. And for us, and from building the models, that was one of our biggest challenges then was actually in the literature and the evidence. So the examples we were using then were 200,000 diabetes publications being published. This isn't something that anybody could ever read. The fact that when you're looking at on oncology, you potentially have 3 million oncology publications and literature to deal with. And this has really set the foundation for where we're up to now with artificial intelligence. So back in 2011, 2012, the kind of AI we can now do on €1,000 MacBook was a €200,000 server. So this, in terms of that transformation, There's really kind of the accessibility and the for everybody, and this isn't specific just to healthcare. And I think it's great to see this kind of real focus in from a top level, from an applied of how everything's tied together. So we have tools that we've used for quite a long time, and actually my biggest challenge up until recently was into that we a lot of what's happening within AI isn't hugely new, but trying to explain it to people in 2013, 2014, before ChatGPT and people could see where this came from, was a massive challenge. And I think this translates also to what we have with health technology assessment. I think it's a very important aspect to connect and actually get people to trust in the systems and the things that are being built. And I think kind of the last two comments, I think the last two panelists, I think really touched on this, that there is trust issues, there is the human aspect issues. I think it really comes to home in terms of separate this into both the data and the tools that we're using. So a lot of what's happening with large language, and I think the two kind of important things to bear in mind with that is back with when we were working with the big data aspect, data is not evidence. And I think the other thing to say with these large language models, and particularly the analysis of it, that also language models are not evidence. We have significant challenges in terms of what the models and the AI is actually capable of doing. I think the ethical issues that we'll kind of come to next tie in really closely with where these gaps are. Because I think and this conversation around them being very good at pattern recognition. I think this is also one of the most important things to bear in mind, that effectively what you're getting with a large language model is an ad populum definition of evidence. It's what the majority of the community say or agree to be true is the answer you will get from a large language model. And within health technology assessment, that is not what we're looking for. We're looking for very logical outcomes based. What do we what is the actual ground truth? Not necessarily what does everybody believe is true. And I think that for health technology assessment is probably our biggest gap to get over with, along with, and will really drive kind of people's trust in it in terms of, are the outputs that we produce trustworthy, and also how we're going to manage the fact that some of the things that are produced within health technology assessment, larger language models will disagree with, simply because they are based on historic fact and information that within health can become outdated very, very quickly.
Mark, thank you. Thank you. So, Flora, so you are the panelist who is someone actually implementing AI on the ground every day. So I wonder really, what is your comment about the biggest gap between promise and reality during the daily routine on the ground?
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. It's certainly been a very interesting few years in AI in healthcare. So I work in a large academic hospital. So we have our hospital operations, and we have a large research institute. And for those of you who have worked, in research, you kind of know the standard way that this happens, where you create your study, you submit it to the research ethics board. It goes through a review process. You do retrospective, silent trial, clinical trial, and it's been like this for many, many years. What I found is that's been very interesting in the last few years, especially since the generative AI type of applications came out, is that now for research or even for building some kind of AI application, it's not only kind of narrowed to the people that have the AI development background, researchers, but now with these applications, kind of regular staff are starting to build their own things. So for example, using a tool like Microsoft Copilot agents, right? right? Which is just a natural language tool. You can just like type what you want the chatbot to do. A nurse in the cardiology department, let's say with a bunch of policies and procedures, can decide to build their own chatbot to be like, hey, I want my staff to be able to query the policies in cardiology, and she can do it in like 2 hours. So now what it is that I found that it's the AI technology now has really democratized the ability to create these new tools and applications that are really helpful. But then it also brings the question of, especially here, we're talking about technology assessment. How do you assess all of these tools that people are now building individually without the framework of something like a research ethics board or quality improvement board that's kind of looking over everything? And so that's sort of the, sort of the big thing that we're working on right now at SickKids. That's why we created the SickKids AI Enterprise Program to evaluate all of these solutions, big and small, to make sure that they're safe before they're deployed. So I would say the biggest gap right now is to figure out an appropriate governance structure to evaluate and make sure that all of these tools are safe before they're deployed, but at the same time, not sort of like stop this technology and innovation from happening because we're moving too slowly. So that's sort of what we're working on right now at SickKids.
Thank you, Flora. Thank you very much. So let's go for the second question. The health technology evaluation has always been about making fair, evidence-based decisions for populations. Yet AI systems can embed biases, and digital tools are not equally accessible across health systems. How do we ensure that the integration of AI into evaluation frameworks strengthens health equity rather than quietly undermining it? And who should be held accountable when it doesn't? So, Mehmet, please, can you answer from your point of view this question?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Again, in my understanding, the equity risk is not just a bias. It's a structural flaw. You know what? It's like, for me, it's like, solely only treating AI equity is just a data problem. It's like trying to fix a leaky boat by only bailing water, okay? But the hole is there. And the hole is that the AI systems, all of them are trained basically on digital traces of past human practices. Because the data is coming either from the internet or either from this, training sets. So they are like the past digital traces of human practices. We need to keep this in mind. And in a sense, in their nature, all these practices, I'm talking about the human practices, they are already inequitable. Now, think about this. You work on a model because, your health system, let's say, like the poor people or rural people or some minority populations, they have little access to the health systems. It's like this all over the world, right? And the data we collect can be poor regarding this subgroup of patients, world population, human population, because they have already this limited access. So if you train your AI, it's also true for radiology, by the way, on this data set, on the available data set, that will result unavoidably in the undermining of this, poor, rural, or minority populations. That's, in my understanding, the real risk. Okay, and now we need to make it sure that we strengthen the equity. In my understanding, to achieve this, we need to focus on three things. First is a situated pluralism. That means we do not need, or we need to avoid to look for a single universal best model. Okay, we need to concentrate on local solutions for local problems, because a problem which is very prominent or which is very risky in that specific part of the world can mean nothing to people working on developing AI systems. That's very important. So the data and all this validation thing and everything should focus on this age diversity, gender diversity, ethnical diversity, on everything. And the second is also very important, the equity on materials. I mean, if we are talking about AI, we are always talking about, like algorithms or models. I mean, like soft issues, okay? But it's also about, the hardware, the energy, the supply chains. I mean, if you cannot guarantee the equal distribution of these resources, then it's also risky regarding our equity, let's say, dream at the end of the day. Because some populations, some subgroups of the world population will have limited access to the hardware or to the energy or to all the supply chains. That's also important. And third, I mean, it's maybe HTA can do it. We need to, perform this fairness surveillance. We need to make it sure that the solutions we are developing are actually available, reachable for everyone in the world. This will ensure the equity. Okay?
Sedef, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you. I really agree what Mehmet was saying about the looking at the like a more local model rather than the big generalized model. But I think the first thing that I would say is that the equity cannot be treated as a downstream audit problem. So if we only ask whether an AI tool is fair after it's already been built and deployed, we are already too late.
Mm-hmm.
So at Vector, we make this point very, very clearly. So 1.5 years ago, we built our own trust and safety principles based on OECD's AI principles. I think it was released in 2019, and then they revised it 2023 based on the values. And we also followed by principle to action guidelines for responsible AI product development. So bias exists across the entire pipeline, and the models should be evaluated on subgroups of the population to determine whether they are biased towards or against certain groups. For the academic standpoint, that means at least 3 things. The first, we have to evaluate representativeness, not just performance. A model can have excellent overall accuracy and still systematically underperform for particular populations. So one of the strongest arguments in ethics and health is that AI should be understood throughout a social justice lens, and that the relevant ethical questions run across the entire pipeline. But that pipeline starts from problem selection all the way to post-deployment use. So, for example, even very high-performing chest X-ray models can still underdiagnose patients who are female, young, Black, or Medicaid. So this is such an important reminder that the aggregate performance can conceal inequity. So the second one is we have to evaluate access and usability, not just the algorithm. A digital tool may be accurate and still widen inequities if it works best in well-resourced. And then the third one is we need to ongoing monitoring, because equity is not static, and population changes, workflow change, data pipeline drift, and the tool that seemed acceptable at launch may quietly become less fair over time. So that's exactly why post-deployment monitoring matters. So one of the strongest lessons from Vector's work I mentioned earlier, the Cyclops, is that the responsible deployment requires monitoring for fairness and data shift over time. So I think that if you want AI to strengthen health equity, then the equity has to become a design criterion, an evaluation criterion, and the governance criterion all at once, not just like a separate all around. So thank you.
Thank you, Sedef. So Mark, as a health economist, do you agree with Mehmet and Sedef? And what is your point in this question?
Thank you. I think in a lot of ways, I'm not sure how much I agree. I think the problem from bias is a much more significant problem than is being given credit to. So I think that, and one of the things I would start with this is we need to be aware with everything we're doing with AI and even within the data, we are only basing all of our recommendations on the things that can be measured. So one of the first significant problems that's only really recently been addressed within HTA generally is things, for example, like the patient perspective. So you look at something like an EQ5D tool that's used kind of generally universally now, that is terrible at measuring mental health conditions. So everything we do, this is using EQ5D, is biased against people with mental health conditions. And everything that we do is biased in some way. And if we're looking at how we need to deal with that, we need to make sure that the human experience within this system is properly captured. So one of my kind of favorite changes that NICE made was recently in their decision making was to take kind of a patient group perspectives to a decision to make sure that things in the decision making were actually properly captured. I think we've also seen, even just within digital itself, for example, you have bias against using the technology. So if you have people who are elderly and disabled, who can't see very well, then how do they actually make use of these? That the system is biased against their use of that technology. And these are kind of the first two pictures here. I actually got AI to generate for me for today just to see where they came from. I think one of this first one is, we have this kind of accessibility. We have this accessibility bias. A lot of what we've spent the last sort of 10 or 15 years building is this idea of a digital twin of the healthcare system. So tying in the models from diseases to healthcare institutions to the care pathways, and then trying to use that to understand one of the biggest things that we do within modeling and healthcare technology assessment is trying to estimate what can't be measured. What would have happened? What would happen if we make a decision? What will happen in the future? What would happen if you did a clinical, if you didn't give a medicine to someone you've given a medicine to? And I think everything we do within that, from publications, from the data that's collected, and what artificial intelligence does to all of that is amplify it 100 times. So we really need to be we need really, it's not just that it needs doing beforehand. It's not just that it's something we can manage. It's something that I think an entire shift towards making sure from a human perspective that the ethical kind of questions are captured, even within things like the AI. So a lot of what happens within artificial intelligence now, they have this idea called guardrails. So they have guardrails implemented in the artificial intelligence systems to make them do things you don't want to do. But from a modeling perspective, if we're modeling human behavior, for example, that's not necessarily something we want, because if we want to predict, for example, how clinician behavior will change under a different decision, clinicians don't always make the right decisions. Healthcare decision makers, you have this kind of gaming of the system, which can be completely cut out by these guardrails. So this level of bias, this bias decision for me, I think is an incredibly important topic. I think it's something that we are only just scratching the surface on. And I think the main thing I'll agree on is it's something we really need to be acutely aware of now before we find out in 5 or 10 years' time that we've taken on systems that systemically bias against individuals that we weren't even measuring or thinking about. And I don't think that's limited to things like special interest groups and smaller groups. In a lot of ways, AI may be biased towards special interest groups. One of the first ones, the reason for the population pyramid at the bottom is one of the first, when I was first doing my modeling, one of the first things I found, when you look at this difference between male and female, it's actually from public healthcare systems, one of the biggest beneficiaries of public healthcare was the males. And suddenly you're like, oh, why? Surely it was both. But actually, you look at this from why was it the males that benefit? Why? Because historically, in the 1930s and 40s, before public healthcare, it was male breadwinner, female homemaker. So when a male got sick, there was no income to pay for the healthcare. When the wife and children were ill, then there was the money to pay for the healthcare. So and that's a theory. We don't have kind of direct influence from that, but really this 1947 change in the healthcare system completely changed our population dynamic. And I think that really highlights what I mean by we don't really know who wins and who loses. Everything is, we are really guessing, and we need to put a lot of effort, particularly within health technology assessment, but I think all the way down to tools that are being used towards the front line to make sure that you have equitable access to the actual healthcare, and consider the fact that people with arthritis can't use mobile phones, to consider that the accessibility options to the technology and how that changes with across the board from the beginning, from the modeling all the way down. And yeah.
So Flora, what is your view on this equity issue or topic?
Yeah, sure. I'll give you an example of a very popular tool that's used in a lot of hospitals these days. It's called the AI Scribe. So you might have heard of it. So these are tools where if you go and see a doctor, it's an AI that can listen in the background to the conversation and then draft up the note for the doctor. So, which is great, right? Like you've all been to the hospital, the clinic before where you're talking to the doctor and he's just looking at the computer typing. And so this is a really great AI tool, and it's probably one of the most popular ones in hospitals these days. But what happens is that if you think about it from an equity lens, a lot of times we just evaluate technology based on the technical performance. So, for this particular tool, does it capture the note properly? How fast does it work? Does it save the doctor time? So all of these are great things. But if you think about it from the patient's perspective, these tools a lot of times are trained on mostly North American English. So Toronto is a very diverse population. So if you have, patients and families come in and English is not their first language, and, does it pick up the right accent? Is it pick up the right information? And if you dig in even further, there are other questions you can ask. Like, for example, in terms of the literacy, right? Like health literacy. So if the patient is describing their symptoms in a very simple way, if English is not their first language, versus somebody else that is, more, familiar with the terminology, then, their notes are much better than the other families. So is that equitable? And then in terms of consent, right? Like as we know, marginalized families, sometimes they're not as comfortable being recorded. And so if they say no to that, then do their notes suffer? And then do their downstream care suffer because there isn't that information that they need? So there are like all of these questions that you think about beyond just the technology. And I just thought that this was a good example to surface, well, this technology seems very simple. It just records the voice, AI drafts the note, but there's all these other considerations that's really important to think about, especially from an equity perspective. And, there are no easy answers to this.
Yeah.
For technology that works better for one group versus another, do you use it or not? So really what it is that to make the best decision for your patients, to make sure that their care is not impacted by whatever technology we choose.
Yeah, right. Thank you, Flora. So now we are coming to the final question, final topic. We have about 15 minutes to more, but there will be also a session for Q&As. The last question says that, let's imagine it's 2035. A health system somewhere in the world has fully integrated AI into its evaluation and decision-making processes. And it's working perfectly. Evidence is richer, decisions are faster, and the patients are at the center. Paint us a picture. Flora, I will start with you this time. What does the system look like, and what had to change technically, culturally, and politically to get there? The floor is yours, Flora.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I mean, 10 years is such a long time, especially in terms of AI. If you think about what happened in the last 3 years. So what I would love to see in my hospital system is that the patient's data will be all available because AI, as Mark mentioned, runs on data. So if you don't have the set amount of data, then you can't make the right predictions. And talking about predictions, I want it to be sort of like a forward-facing model, where instead of reacting to a patient being sick and now you treat them, to be able to kind of look at their history, look at let's say their mobile data to figure out, okay, what might happen in a month, and then to prevent that from happening. So that's sort of on the data side. So I feel like one thing that might have to change in terms of research is the idea that a randomized control trial or clinical trials is like sort of the standard for all technical assessments. Because right now AI is growing so quickly that if you start a trial, by the time you end it, the technology might be obsolete and you don't have that ability to keep adapting. So I feel like the sort of the innovation that I hope will move forward is a quick way to adapt to new technology and to figure out how to, solve these problems as we go iteratively instead of kind of running these traditional trials. So that's what I would love to see.
Thank you, Flora. Mark, let's paint us the picture 2035.
This is actually a slide from an earlier presentation I did a while ago, but I think it really kind of one of the first places I want to start with that kind of question is how far away is 2035? And on the one hand, 10 years in terms of healthcare, it's not a huge amount of time. But from a technology perspective, how we've progressed over the last 10, 15 years, I think is absolutely breathtaking. I think, and one of the most important for me times on this timeline is this 2007. Before 2000, the first iPhone was only 2007. And we live in a world where I don't think anybody here or listening can imagine a world without the iPhone and without these smartphone technologies. In terms of AI and in terms of what this looks like, it's a lot of what we focus on with this national health model and digital twin. But I think for me, I think the key, what does that look like and what does it look like in perfect is, I think it's that it frees the human resource to not spend time doing a lot of the paperwork and administrative and spend a lot more time focused on the human aspect, to focus on the patient, to focus on people that really need it, to back to the equity question, to be able to focus directly on giving more support to the people that need it while not leaving the other people behind. I think in terms of Europe wide, the actual access to this technology is something that's really going to need really something that needs to be able to change. So you have a very diverse healthcare systems within Europe and very diverse healthcare decision making, and the trust levels in terms of what you even if you look at something like health technology assessment itself, the differences between somewhere like Croatia that's still using budget impact and not considering cost effectiveness analysis in its decisions, to the more developed countries that have very, very strong health technology assessments. I think we have a real disconnect between how quickly the technology is moving forward versus how far we put that in. And I think the randomized control trial, I think, is a great example of that, because there are fundamental reasons why it has to be a randomized control trial, to take away from the biases and this cost between how long we have to wait to be sure of something versus the lower quality evidence we take from things like real world evidence and connect those together. So I would hope 2035 that we end up with this really comprehensive system that frees a lot of the human resource to be more human oriented and less computer oriented. I think that's probably the biggest change from the healthcare system. But I think we actually, to get to that 2035 is probably not long enough away. I think the technology will be there, but I don't see the healthcare systems itself being generally available to everybody.
And Sedef, as you are the director in the world-leading AI Institute, Vector Institute, so how are you gonna picture us 2035?
Right. So I'm going to start with this analogy. 10 years ago, many of us watched AlphaGo, right? So like a famous move 37, and realized that AI could do something more than automate routine tasks. It could surface a possibility that experts did not expect, right? And in March 2016, AlphaGo defeated famous AlphaGo player 401 in a match watched by more than millions of people, right? Like I think more than 200 million people, I would say. And that moment became a symbol of AI's creative potential.
Mm-hmm.
But the more important lesson came after AlphaGo is AlphaFold. AI moved from a spectacular demonstration to a piece of scientific infrastructure. So today, the AlphaFold protein structure database provides open access to over millions of predicted protein structure, and AlphaFold 3 extend that capability to modeling complexities involving, like proteins, nucleic acids, small molecules, ions, and so on and so forth. So when I imagine 2035, I do not imagine a health system that looks like AlphaGo, dramatic, visible center stage. I imagine the health system that looks more like AlphaFold. AI is no longer a headline. It is a part of underlying architecture of learning. So it's quietly helping the system see patterns earlier, test interventions faster, and adapt in real time. So, and the patients are truly at the center, not symbolically. The system is not just the system is not the optimizing for predictive accuracy. It is tracking what matters to people, whether they got the right care sooner, whether the pathway less burdensome, whether the trust was preserved, whether access was fair, and whether the outcomes actually improved in light terms. So I think we also look at the deeper change, the culturally, is the system had to stop treating evaluation as the job of a small expert class and start treating it as the shared enterprise among clinicians, patients, researchers, and data scientists, and of course, like AI leaders. So for politically, what changed is that the trust stopped being treated as a communications issue and become a design requirement. So the system, for me, to succeed by 2035 were the ones that built public legitimacy through transparency, challenge mechanism, and clear accountability. We talked about that earlier. And so the picture I would leave with you is this. The AlphaGo was the moment AI surprised us, and AlphaFold was the moment AI started serving science at scale. And then the health system of 2035 will succeed when AI makes the same transition in healthcare from great performance to trusted, human-centered, patient-centered infrastructure.
Okay. Thank you, Sedef. So, Mehmet, you are the professor in radiology, and radiology means imaging. So, image us 2035.
It's 2035, not 2040, right?
Okay, so you are free. You can go up to 5 years more. Go on.
Okay. Now, I mean, like, again, from the point of view of a radiologist, I'm imagining, I'm not talking about the general healthcare systems, but like the radiology tools or radiology AI systems we will utilize in 2035, okay? I will just try to narrow the focus. Now, for me, the ideal system in 2035 will look like the cockpit of a modern airplane. It will not be a self-driving car. Okay, it should be. I mean, it needs to include the dashboard, everything, and also something like decision support systems, just to support my all the decisions and everything. But to achieve this, we need to change like three things, or we need to perform changes on three levels, on three dimensions. First of all, we need to move from the black boxes to more composable and also causally aware systems. So I need to, as a if you prefer speaking like this as a human judge, I need to, again, like in the beginning of this panel, I told you, for me the validation is very important. I need to be able to judge the AI's decision, the decision about my patients actually. And culturally, I believe that the radiologists in particular will no more be afraid of AI, that AI will replace them or stuff like this. They will see AI like a real, like strong co-pilots, skillful co-pilots who will sharpen their own judgment, the judgment of the radiologists. And politically, it's also important. This, for example, the EU has this AI Act, but I mean, things need to change because still EU sees AI as a medical device, but it should start to see it as a process, actually. A process that needs to be, judged and verified and stuff like this. And two things are important. We need to let go two things. The first is this myth of fully automated validator. We don't need to have something like this regarding AI, but I'm talking about 2035, not 2040, okay?
Yes.
I mean, that's the point. And the second thing is nowadays, the most important virtue is like the speed of AI. We need to also let it go. I mean, a slower system, which is much more better in validation, is for me more precious than a very fast system, actually. Okay, we need also start focusing on quality, not only solely on quantity. And we always need to keep something sacred. And this, in my understanding, is human responsibility, or in better terms, human answerability. I mean, she or he needs to look a clinician in the eye, and the clinician needs to say, I have considered the AI's advice, but here, this is my judgment as a human being. So, I mean, if my judgment is false, be sure that I will have this sleepless nights and everything. AI will never have something like this, okay? For AI, this is a statistical error. That's it.
Okay.
So, okay, that was my answer.
Thank you, Mehmet. Thank you. So we are finished with our questions, but now let me give 5 more minutes because we have some questions at the Q&A. And please, if there is another question, raise your hand. One question, Mehmet, you are the only clinician here. Maybe it's for you. How do you see mental health treatments will change in the light of AI in 2035?
So, I mean, in 2025 or 2035?
35.
35. Everyone will go crazy actually in 2035. So there will no need to. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, this is actually something we discuss in this part of the panel about equity and everything. Because, I mean, like for AI, at least for now and also for the foreseeable future, like for the next 5 years, the statistics and at the end of the day, normal distribution is everything. So this mental health issues, if they become the normal, then AI can treat it very well. If still there's people with mental problems, but I mean, it's a relative thing. Still, I mean, in a fascist world, if you are a liberal, this can be also considered as a mental illness. Does it make sense? So
yes.
Then you become an outlier. Then, I mean, the life can get difficult for you.
Yes, you're right. So there is another question. I will ask this, and whoever wants to answer, please take your mic. How can AI convert large and diverse data, in brackets, real world and otherwise, into evidence? How can AI convert large and diverse data into evidence? So who wants to answer this question?
I'll take that. Oh, go ahead, Mark.
I'll come after you, Sedef.
That's
Yes.
okay. Yeah, I'm just gonna go very short and fast. I know we're passing our time, so I think AI helps transform large diverse data sets into evidence in stages, I would say. So first by integrating, like a data, then detecting patterns, then generating risk signals or like predictions, and finally validating those signals against the, let's say, like a clinical outcomes and real world use. So the key point is that the data itself is not in evidence, and the prediction alone is not an evidence. So it becomes evidence only when it's shown to be like a clinically meaningful, like a fair and useful in practice. We talked about earlier within the panel. So I'll give you like a short answer, but over to you, Mark.
I think I think I'll actually expand on what you actually said earlier. I think one of the where this is going to really come from, and actually one of the biggest challenges within HTA is the monitoring. So as the following from the follow-up, as we develop systems that we make recommendations and decisions where the consequences of those decisions are then followed up afterwards and can be acted upon in a timely fashion. I think this is really where there's this whole conversation around what do you mean by evidence, but I think that's really where it's going to turn it into is in the health technology assessment systems incorporate AI that follow the monitoring where you have a decision made on the evidence. So a lot of what we do within the national health model, for example, is when our models are not predicting what we see in the real world. So this is where you then see there's some kind of misunderstanding within the evidence where you say this is what we think is going to happen, but something different is actually happening. Your theory that you're basing that on has some kind of flaw within it. I also just want to come back very quickly just to finish off on that last question because the last conversation really hit home. One of the big things a few years ago when we were talking about rare diseases was this transition at 18 from children. So you have within rare diseases, was a really nasty transition when the children became 18. So before they were 18, it was treated as a patient. And after 18, patients are generally treated by disease. I think that's really to me what this patient-centric aspect means. And in terms of this is we're going to start treating patients as people rather than patients as a disease or a specific problem to be solved. I think this more holistic kind of cover thing is really going to be where that changes.
Okay, thank you, Mark. There is one or two more questions, but due to the time limits, we have to cut here. And on behalf of HTAi and the moderator of today, I want to thanks to Professor Şükrü Mehmet Ertürk, Dr. Sedef Akinli Kocak, Mark Parker, and also Flora Wen for their knowledge, their openness, and commitment to a healthier and more equitable world. So this conversation does not end here. It continues in your institution, your research, your policy rooms, and your wards. And looking forward to seeing where it takes us all. Thank you very much and have a nice day, evening, and see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.